Welcome to Discovering. We can always use another fishing rod. Maybe you want to consider a custom built rod or build your own. We'll take a look.
Anybody can make these fishing rods, it's no big deal.
And Kristen's on top of Brockway Mountain for the annual spring raptor migration count. Stick around, that's all tonight right here on Discovering.
The secret streams that flow beneath the cliffs of colored stone. Forest thick and healthy with birch and pine and oak. Surrounded by the greatest lakes this world has ever known. The black bear's awesome presence as he roams the hills and fields. Call of the timber wolf, the loon's lonesome trill. The eagle soaring high above, the trout lies deep and still. These are what I treasure, the only way I measure feelings that I have for this fine land. There is so much to discover when you're a long-time lover of northern Michigan.
One of the best parts of putting a show together each week is the interesting people we get to meet. I recently had the pleasure of spending some time with Duane Barnard of Iron Mountain. As soon as I walked into his basement, I knew he'd fit that description. Duane fixes fishing reels, and he makes a variety of lures, as well as other unique items.
It's all bird feathers. There's no hook in there at all. It's just the hook is made out of a bird feather.
He's an artist, and he builds fishing rods.
First of all, I got the ingredients I here, so I'll make this rod here. I got a kit that I got from the mud hole where I buy my stuff. It's the handle kit. I got to ream this out so it'll fit on here. It's a lot faster this way than doing it by hand. There, that's got to be it right there. Bring that right down there. See, it's right even with the butt there. You put the glue in here, and you glue that cap on there like that, see. Then, see, your reel seat goes on next. It goes on here. But you get a lot of play in here, so you have to have an arbor to take up that space. Now I'm going to drill this here out, so it'll slide over to not about here. It's on there pretty snug right there. And you see my reel seat fits right over the top of that. Then after the reel seat comes the foregrip. You don't have to drill that out too. Yeah, the company suggests you do this by hand by this little same thing, but the handle, but it takes forever to do it that way. If you got the drill like this, not quite. I want it to fit snug, but not to force that cork because the cork will split. See, now that brings right up there, right snug up there, see? A washer here, a little rubber washer called a winding chuck. Slides right down up against here, and then you're ready to go, see? You have to find out where the belly is. You might call it. Each blank has a stiff part on it. And watch when I roll it, it'll flip in a certain position. There, see that? I'm bending it. When I roll it, it lands right there. So that means the belly is on this side. So all my guides are going to be on this side of the pole. I'll mark that piece of tape here. Once I know where my belly is, then I'll have to know where to line up my reel here, see? This here where you put your reel in, that's got to line right up with here, see? I would line this up because I know where my belly is going to be right here, so I put that on top. So all my guides are going to be along this top here. I got to glue this stuff in now. When I first started, I used a little measuring cups to do this, but I don't hardly do that anymore with just a little bit. I'll just take a guess by how much I'm going to need for this job here. So I'll just take a little scoop like that of the resin. Try to get about the same amount of this hardener here. Then I got to mix it up now. This one takes about 20 minutes to set, and the other one takes like 24 hours. Now you know it's going to come about here, but I got to start way up here with that stuff. Way up here with that epoxy. As it comes out, I'll kind of spin this around as I'm going down the road here. It slides down a lot easier than it did before because the epoxy makes it slippery. I'll bring that right down to the end there. There you go. Put some of that epoxy in here, the groove here, and I'll spin it both ways here. Sometimes you get a piece of cork that's got a little groove in it. See it comes sneaking out of there? Bring my arbor down, spin that on the way down too. Come to about maybe half an inch from the end there. Cover that. I'm going to put a piece of tape on the threads here. I'll start this on here and spin this around good. It's forcing that epoxy up on there. I'll get about there and I'll stop it. I'll scrape this off. Remember, I got to line up this reel seat. As it hardens up, I'm in auto lock then. I always put, glue way up ahead. Get about that far, then I'll catch this here so I don't get too much on there. Still lined up there, okay. I put glue on here too, so I slide this down. You can see it building up right there. Push it up against there and then shove it up against there. Then I'll come around here and get the extra off. This is 5 foot 6 inches, so 5 foot 6 inches. I get 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 guides. And the first one is at 5.5 inches. So put a little marker here, 5.5, right there. 11.5, 18.5. It'll be 42.5, so. Now this is what the factory recommends, and all the manufacturers recommend there. Your spacing. I have to sharpen this up so the line goes on better. Clean this up here a little bit. So anybody can make these fishing rods. It's no big deal. It's just learning the technique and being patient in doing it. But you don't want to skip a lot of these important things, because if you do it, it's going to be more difficult later on. Now this is one of the methods I use to put the guides on. See, I got the reel seat on top here. Everything's on top here, so I know where my line is there. Guide is right in line with that there. I'll just tape that on there like that, see. I can line that up again and snug him up. Bang, bang. Try to get them all lined up on top, see, so after I get all the winding on them, then I can go ahead and lie down the pole and line them up. I usually put the hook keeper on the side here, so I got a mark here for the hook keeper here. So when you're actually fishing it, you're going to be fishing like this, so your hook keeper over on the side. I can control it with my foot. All these different kinds of colors I can use. So just for this one, I'll show it what shows up maybe better. I'll go with this black, and it's called Trimar. It shows up pretty good. I'll wrap it about twice. Wrap it around twice like that. I'll kind of hang on to it and let this line wrap over the top of this one. See that? See how it wrapped over itself there? Maybe a quarter, half an inch or so there, so that it'll keep wrapping over itself and tightening up that line there. I find this snake on the road, been run over by a car, and he brings it into me, and I clean it and preserve it and everything. That's pine snake. Python. This I get from eBay. A sea snake. They tell me they're really poisonous over in the islands over there. I have rattlesnake. This is your Packer fan. Well, everything can make one of a kind, so I'm just kind of tugging it around here with it. This is called burnishing tool right here. See, I got a space right there. I don't like. See the space right there? So I just snug that sucker over a little bit here. It's wrapping itself up on there now. If you don't file this down on here and get that tapered down really good, it's hard to get that line to come up on that leg, on that foot there. It's coming up pretty good now. And once I get about that far, then I'll remove this tape on here. You got that much space left to wrap it up there. So I got one of these line pullers, we call it. Slide it underneath there like that. So this is being wrapped up at the same time. That's about as far as I want to go there. I'll hold that with my finger, and I'm going to cut that off. Slide that through the hole there, that opening there, and hold that. Get my left hand, I'll pull here, and I'll pull that right underneath that winding there. See that? Put a little pressure on it. Come with a knife, with a razor blade. And you can't even see where that was there, you see. Then I'll go ahead and do the whole thing all the way through. This could easily be done by hand wrapper too, because that's when I first learned to do this. Everything I did by hand, and I can still do that by hand too. What size tip to use? It measures what size I need to put on that tip there. It says a number 6. So I'll go with my tips over here. Then after I get through, I can heat it. If it's not lined up perfect, I just heat it a little bit and turn it a little bit. Just plain 70% alcohol, just the cheap stuff you get from the store. See, I'll check and see if everything is tight here. Everything's all there, lined up. Everything's lined up, okay. So when it dries, it's still nice and smooth and everything. That's just about it right there. Now, you know, I have to put my hook keeper on yet and get this lined up better and then epoxy it, see. But I'm gonna wait till this thing sets before I put it on the lathe here to finish it up. So that's just about it right there.
Every spring, the Keweenaw Bird Research Group counts raptors on the top of Brockway Mountain. I caught up with their counter, Tim Barrowald, near the end of this season to learn more about what they do.
The season runs March 15th through June 15th. You count pretty much 8 hours a day, 7 days a week, unless it's raining, fogged in, or snowing. So, and even then, like if the rain stops, you'll come up and count, or if the fog dissipates, you'll come up and count. So it's all the raptors. So vultures, hawks, eagles, falcons. If a kite wants to fly by, we'll count it. So, you know, if an owl flies by, you'll count it too. And that's pretty much it's what those birds are considered raptors, and they're diurnal migrants flying during the day. And they all kind of have similar physical features, so they kind of all get lumped together, and that's what you keep track of on these counts. When we're counting, we're trying, if possible, you want to identify them to species and then age them, and some of the birds you can sex them. So like rough-legged hawks, if it's a good look, you can separate males from females. By doing that, you can get a pretty large data set of how many species, how many individuals in that species, and how many ages. All that data from our count, all the other counts in North America go to a central database that's run by Hawk Migration Association of North America. And you can get a pretty good picture of how many raptors are migrating north in the spring and south in the fall. And by doing that, you can learn a lot about the rest of the ecosystem because raptors are an apex predator. They're top of the food chain. And you can learn a lot about what's happening below that, all the way down to how much food is out there for mice to feed on that the raptors are eating, just by counting them and keeping track of them. And that was something where, doing raptor counts, they figured out what DDT was doing. It's really fascinating. And by having all that data centralized, it makes it easy to learn, see big picture changes. Usually the peak migration is first week of May. That's when adult broadwings hit. And broadwinged hawk is pretty much the only raptor that completely leaves North America every year. So the entire population leaves, goes down through Mexico, goes down south of Mexico, overwinters, and then in the spring they all come back. So you get huge flights of them. Back in April, when it was more of a typical spring airflow with a lot of south winds, had 120 rough-legged hawks in a day. And that's the second highest record ever for the Keweenaw. And that's going back into the 60s and 70s. On a day like today, the raptors will be riding thermals, where they can just get into the thermal, circle up, coast off the top, go down to the next thermal, up, and they never have to flap. When you get the wind that picks up and starts building, it starts breaking up the thermals. And then instead of riding thermals, the raptors shift to riding updrafts off the ridge lines here. When the raptors are running the ridge line, it's like counting cars on an interstate. Just, they're running right past 1, 2, 4, 5 at a time. So you can just see all the ridges extending down and out in the Keweenaw. And Brockway is the northmost ridge. So after here, you got Lake Superior. Raptors don't like flying over open water. They have to flap, they have no place to land, where if they could stay over land, they can ride thermals and updrafts off the cliff edges, so they get concentrated. So with a south wind, potentially all the birds in the Keweenaw, all the raptors migrating, could be pushed up onto this ridgeline. And that's how you get thousands in a day. And because they're running the updrafts, they're low. You'll look down, they're in the valley, they're coming right by at eye level. And you don't get that many other places in the country, and especially in the East and especially in the Midwest. There's no other place like this in Michigan. Everywhere else, they're just cruising up high overhead. We're here on a good day. They're right here in your face. And the Keweenaw is kind of a dead end for them because it ends in Lake Superior. So they get to the tip and then presumably they go, oh, huh, this is a lot of water. And then they turn around and it seems like, we assume, there's more research that could be done, we assume they then leave the Keweenaw and go around probably through Duluth and around that side. We don't know. It's something where banding studies should be done, and nanotags and GPS, you could learn a lot about it, but that hasn't happened yet. Last season was the record low, and this season's about 2,000 better than that, so that's good. It's not close to the good years from 10 years ago or so, but we've had kind of a new weather pattern the last 2 springs where about the time the migration's peaking, we drop into a month of north winds or northeast winds or east winds, and that just shuts the flight down for up here, where up here you want south winds to push the birds up to into the Keweenaw and then to this side of the Keweenaw. It's not uncommon on those conditions at peak migration to get a couple thousand birds coming by. And the last 2 springs, we haven't had those conditions during peak migration. So your peak day is 400, 500 birds, which the birds are still migrating. They're just not coming all the way up here. Other counts along Lake Superior the last 2 springs have had average or above average seasons.
This point where we are along Lake Superior is right in the middle. There's counts in Duluth, there's counts at Whitefish and the Straits. And so we are pretty integral right here in getting the data that would fill that whole area and everything coming up the Central Highway, the Migration Highway. We do have a website. It's the Keweenaw Bird Research Group, and it's thekbrg.org. You can also put brockwayhawkwatch.org. They both go to that page, and it's got all the information, more detailed history, what we count. We post the reports from the counter annually, so there's a very detailed report on there every year.
Well, that's it for this week. Be sure to check out 906outdoors.com, where you'll find the 906 Fishing Report, TV6 weather, shopping, and more. Thanks for watching, and I hope to see you next week, right here on Upper Michigan's very own Discovering.